and welcome to my session. I'm operating mostly on the choral side this week, so if you've been over there for anything, we've probably said hello, but I am very happy to scoot on over to the piano bench for this session. When I first started coming here about maybe 15 years ago or so, I was solely on the piano side, so it makes me happy to get back to my roots a little bit this afternoon. Just a little background on myself while we're waiting. When I was growing up, I was the big church pianist. And so when I was younger, we had children's church and big church. Now children's churches all have like fancy, modern, exciting names, like Ignite Children's Ministry or whatever. Back then we just called it the children's church. So yeah, children's church and big church. And so I was the big church pianist starting from age 11, all the way up until just a number of years ago. And when I resigned from my church music position, sorry, there's a cat that keeps hitting me. It was when I had resigned from my church pianist position, my church staff position, to be a full-time composer. And so I was traveling all over the country on weekends to be at composer weekends at other people's churches, so it didn't make sense for me to be the church pianist anymore. But I am most at home on the piano bench, I feel like. And it's one of those things where if I walk into a social situation, I have a little bit of social anxiety, and one of my triggers is when I walk into a social situation that I'm not real familiar with, and I have to figure out where to sit or where to stand. And it sounds so silly, but that's one of my things. And if there's a piano in the room, I try to make myself make my way over to the piano bench, not because I want to play in the social situation, but it's just where I'm the most comfortable. I feel like I belong, I have a place. And I guess you could call it maybe my emotional support furniture. It is a thing. It's my emotional support. Gosh, y'all.
Yeah.
It's fun. I do have an emotional support piece of furniture. It's the piano bench. It brings me peace. But I spend quite a bit more time in the choral world now, which is, that's kind of become my bread and butter over the years. But piano was always my first love. And being a church pianist is who I am deep in my soul. I think in a not unhealthy way, being a church pianist kind of becomes part of our identity a little bit. And I don't think that's unhealthy to say. I think it can go to an unhealthy place. And I might have said that differently, 15 years ago when I first started teaching lessons and sessions here. I might have just said, your identity is in Christ, and that's true. But the older I get and the more I recognize His calling on my life and I see it on other people's lives, I don't think it's wrong to accept His calling on us, and that's who we are. And He might change us around and move us around, and that's where we have to make sure that it does not go to an unhealthy place. So anyways, church pianist. We're all church pianists of some degree in here. Yes?
I'm
No?
a music leader.
Music leader? Okay.
And friend of the church.
And friend of the church pianist. Well, I love that you're here showing support and maybe wanting to learn a little bit about the pianist. That's great. Church pianist, even though we love it and it's our identity, it's not without its challenges, right? Which is why I have titled my session, How Do You Play That? And you have to kind of wrinkle up your nose when you say that. How do you play that? It's for those moments when you open up the music and you immediately start negotiating with God. Lord, help me. Kind of like forget the wheel, but Jesus, take my left hand. It's like, what were they thinking when they wrote that? As a composer, people probably say the same thing about my music. I don't know. So I wanted to take this session and focus on things that might trip us up sometimes, things that strike fear in our hearts when we look at the page, and break those apart, break them down, work through them systematically so that they become a little bit more manageable, not as scary. Because we've all been there where we're staring at the music like it has personally offended us. I've looked at the music before and it's just like, how do you read that? I don't get it. So that's what we're going to do today once our worksheets get here. I know that we have a lot of different backgrounds in here, a lot of different experience levels in here. Some of you could probably teach this class as well as I can. So some of us are university level players. Some of us say, you know, I've only had a few years of piano lessons, but there was a need in my church. Someone needed to do it, so I raised my hands, and it's a lot. Some of you say I took piano lessons my whole life, and I still feel like it's hard sometimes. And then some of us have just natural ability where it comes very easily to us. So I understand that we're all coming from different places, and I applaud all of you, not in a condescending, patronizing way, but we all take what we have, and we give it to God, and we give it to Him to use, and we're a good steward of that. So, having said that, I'm going to try to give solutions and tips today that can be applied across the board, regardless of what level you think that you're at, you feel like you're at, and that's the goal at least. So I was going to talk about our first saboteur, our first thing that sabotages us, but we really can't do that right now because you have to see it. Okay, so I'm going to jump way around on my notes because you need to have those handouts to understand what I'm talking about. Okay, so at the very end, I was going to give you some tips for practicing, some tips for sight reading just as an added bonus. And we don't need to have a worksheet for that. So pretend like I've given you all of the wonderful suggestions. And we'll just jump into the end now. Okay, so for the tips for practicing, none of these are going to be earth-shattering. These are things that if we're struggling anywhere in any of the areas that we're going to talk about, we're probably not doing these things even though we know them. So the first thing is slow practice. If you can't play it slowly and correctly, you definitely cannot play it fast and correctly. And I've had so many people come to me and say, oh, you need to hear my nephew play this song. You're just going to be amazed. And the nephew sits down and plays so fast with a whole bunch of missed notes and hitting extra notes. And like, isn't that fantastic? Look at all those notes he's playing. And I'm thinking, oh no, that's not what we're supposed to do. So practice slowly. If you cannot play it slowly and correctly, you definitely cannot play it fast and correctly. My next point, again, nothing earth-shattering, but we need it. The metronome is going to give you the biggest musical facelift you've had in a long time if you have not used it recently. I was one of those people who didn't use a metronome very much. My teachers didn't require it of me, and so I never used it. And I felt like piano came easily to me. And since so much about piano came easily to me, and so much about music came easily to me, I thought, well, I don't need the crutch of a metronome. That was so prideful, you all. Because I have learned in my adult years how many things it can help you fine-tune. You know, sometimes we think of a metronome as just being the thing that keeps us having a consistent tempo, and that's true. But it's kind of like eating a banana when you're hungry. You eat a banana because you're hungry, and it satisfies the hunger, but it does so many other good things, right? You've got all the vitamins and minerals, you've got the potassium and all of that stuff. Well, the same thing with the metronome. One of the biggest things that it does is it exposes weaknesses in our fingers. When you have weakness in your fingers, that's why sometimes you are not keeping a consistent beat. Sometimes it's because we have an internal metronome that's not finely tuned. Sometimes it's because our fingers are weak, and where we should be holding on to something just a little bit, they've already moved on to the next thing because they're just that weak. Or maybe it's the opposite. We're supposed to be moving forward, and it's the weakness that keeps us back a little bit. Another thing that it exposes is it shows us exactly which passages we're not as solid on as we thought. So when you, right before a performance of something, even if when I say performance, that can be accompanying the choir anthem, it can be the offertory, the prelude, whatever. Pull out the metronome, because it's going to show you where you're probably going to have a little bit of trouble when you get in front of an audience. I had a teacher say to me once that we lose 25% when we have nerves, and I might say it's a little bit more than that sometimes. And so if you're a little bit shaky on anything, when you're by yourself practicing, when you get in front of people and some nerves might kick in, find the weakest 25% of your piece, and that's the part that's going to unravel, most likely. So the metronome shows us where those weak spots are. I wrote here, think of metronome practice as humbling yourself before the Lord. It's this mirror that we hold up, they talk about the mirror of God's Word. So musically, the metronome, oh, forgive me, Lord, this sounds so awful. It's like God's Word in our piano playing. It just holds a mirror up to everything that we're doing wrong. So. And if you don't want to spend money on a metronome, there are so many apps. Do we have them? Thank you so much. Thank you. So yeah, get an app. You have it right here with you at all times. It's so easy to work on. I'm trying to remember which one I got. Let me see here. Mine has changed names several times, and so mine is Soundbringer, I think. But there are many out there that you can use. Okay, my third practicing tip. Again, not earth-shattering, but practical. Don't start at the beginning when you're practicing.
No what?
Don't start necessarily at the beginning. Start where it's hard, not where it's comfortable. Now, the first time you open up a piece of music, that's great. I always play through something just to get the feel for it. But when, we're adults, we don't have unlimited rehearsal time, right? So when you sit down, you have to make every second of that rehearsal time at the piano count. So jump to the parts that actually are going to require a little bit of extra rehearsal. And then my fourth thing, I'm all the way at I'm on the back, you can write this down if you want. My fourth thing for just rehearsal tips, I have loop it like a TikTok reel. I don't even have TikTok though. Loop it like a TikTok reel. So you're going to play that same tricky passage over and over and over, and you just don't stop. And you can take it as slow as you need to have all the right notes, but you just keep it looping until you cannot get it wrong. Then you go back a measure or two where it's easier. And you add those two measures before the hard stuff. And you loop it that way again. And the reason why you do that is because for some reason, and I don't understand why psychologically, you have to seam those together. And then when you have that all worked out, where it's seamless, the easy part into the hard part, then you add the measures afterwards that are easy, and you loop the pre-hard, the hard, and the post-hard, and then you loop all of that back and forth and forth. Because otherwise what's going to happen, if you just loop the hard parts, you're going to play, clunk, and you're going to fall into that pothole, and you're going to think, what in the world? I have just practiced this 1,000 times. It's because you actually have to add on the measures before and keep the loop going. When you get that mastered, add on the loops at the measures at the end, and then loop that around.
You're talking about something that has bothered me about directors, choral directors a lot, in that they'll go to the hard part, but they don't understand the transition because you're tripping over the transition, you're not always just tripping over the part.
Right, absolutely. So that is something that it took me a little bit longer in life to realize that I had to sew everything together right there, and it will really help, I think. Okay, so now let's go back. Is there an extra worksheet?
She's just putting up a few more.
A few more, okay.
I have mine because I'm an artist, not a pianist. But
Okay,
I'm married
thank
to a
you.
pianist.
Thank you, you guys can share. Okay, so here is, we talked about things that sabotage us. Our first saboteur is how to maneuver playing tricky key signatures. When I was growing up, my generation learned all of the flat key signatures first. Yeah, and some of you are nodding your heads. Which meant that anytime I got to a key signature that was over 2 sharps, I got a little panicky and it was a little bit scary for me. And that was the time in the church world, or maybe it's just that our church was so little, we didn't get the hymns 2 weeks in advance or a week in advance. I got the hymns at the piano as the music director was announcing the hymn numbers.
Oh,
So then which didn't bother me, you know, music came naturally to me, that to flip over and find it really fast and then trying to bend the book back and put other books next to it. So that it doesn't cover any of the notes. You guys know how this goes. Yep. And I would see it was in the key of A major. And I would be like, oh no. I mean, I had to eventually learn the sharp key signatures, but they never felt good to me because by the time I had gone through all of the flat key signatures, I had advanced in so much technique that I was pretty advanced. And then to have to go back and try to learn the sharps, it wasn't all that great. And so I would see the 3 sharps and I would immediately transpose to 4 flats. You guys know how that works? You take the number of sharps and you subtract that from 7, and whatever's left over is how many flats you play those notes in. So I would do that every time. Thankfully, piano curriculum now, I think, teaches both flats and sharps kind of simultaneously. I've been told, okay, that's good, so you guys don't have to stumble around with sharps like my generation. So, crash course on key signatures. Before we get into maneuvering tricky stuff, let's just talk about how do you know what key you're playing in. And I know that many of you are familiar with this, but I'm going to give you a really quick tip here. So when you're playing in flats, in the major key signatures, you look at your second to the last flat, and that's what key you're in. So when you look at that first example right there, the second to the last flat in the key signature is an E flat, that's the key you're in, right? You look at the next key signature, which I've given you all the answers, so that's so you can take it home in case you forget. So the second to the last flat there is an A flat, so that's what key you're in. Does everybody understand that about flats? Okay. So the sharps, it's a little bit different, and as it goes on, it gets a little trickier. So the sharps, you take your very last sharp. So in the first one, your G sharp is the last sharp, right? You go up a half step, that's the key you're in. So you look at the next one, the very last sharp is a D sharp. Don't think it's a D, think it's a D sharp. Because then a half step up from D sharp is an E. If you think a half step up from D, then you're at E flat or D sharp, and that's not the key you're in, okay? The next one, you take the last sharp, which is an A sharp, you go up a half step, that's a B. Now here's where it gets a little tricky. When you get to F sharp, the last sharp that's written there is an E sharp, right? So enharmonically, what is an E sharp?
F.
It's an F. So a half step up from F is F sharp. So what I don't want you to do is look at that, that E sharp, bump it up, and you're in the key of F, because that's incorrect. Does everybody understand that? Okay, and the same thing with the next key signature, which I don't know why anyone in the world would write in the key of C sharp major. Just do D flat. But you take that B sharp, and a B sharp enharmonically on the piano is a, so a half step up from that is C sharp. Okay, so that's just the crash course part. So, how do you maneuver tricky key signatures with ease? So what I do, if I open up a piece of music and it's obviously written in Satan's key signature, you know, something that you can do, it is. Those C sharp major is not of the Lord, y'all. I play scales in that key. And I know that a lot of us don't play scales in our practice anymore. We kind of feel like we did our time on those 30 years ago or whatever. But I will play scales in that key using the correct key fingering. And you can play scales in both hands together, both hands separately, but you need to play them in both hands. And I would do at least 2 octaves. Start slowly, making sure that each finger is played with confidence and follows all the way through. You can gradually start to build a little bit of speed. the purpose of this exercise is not to play fast, right? The purpose of this exercise is to ground yourself in the key and for your fingers to confidently and instinctively find the right accidentals without you having to think too much about it. And so when you play scales, you're grounding yourself with the right fingers in that key. So I would do that. That's the first thing I would do if you're struggling with Satan's key signature. The next thing that I would do is to play block chord inversions in that key. So a block chord is when you take a triad and you just kind of drop it down. Does everybody understand what a block chord is? Okay, great. So let's say we're in the key of, oh, thank you. And you know what, if you want to give it to this gentleman over here who was so nice to give me his copy. So an inversion, here's your, let's say we're playing in D flat. Let's say you don't like D flat, I love D flat. So D flat, your root position, you have the D on the bottom, right? So the next inversion is first inversion when you go up to the F on the bottom. Everybody got that? Yes? Okay. Second inversion, you got the A flat on the bottom. So what I would do if you're in an awful key, both hands, separately or together, you're going to do block chord inversions up and down the piano to the point where you don't have to kind of fumble and shake your fingers around to find them. You're going to do them that slow, well slower than that if you need to, until you don't really have to think that much about it. You can almost do it without looking. Both hands up and down, and do it on 1, 4, and 5 chords. And the reason why you do it on 1, 4, and 5 chords, not just because those anchor the key signature, but because you hit every note in the scale. You hit every note in the key signature if you will do block chord inversions up and down the piano in those 3 chords. So you've got the scales that completely ground you, and then you've got the block chord inversions up and down that will really help ground you in the key that you're in. So those are the 2 best ways I know how to master a tricky key signature when you're like, oh gosh, rather than trying to figure out every accidental as you come to it, and every G sharp as you come to it, all of those things. This is just the easiest way, and it's the best way, I really feel like. Okay. Next up, we've got the next saboteur of playing tricky time signatures. And you will see there that I did give some examples of some tricky time signatures. You might not think these are tricky, you all. I thought they were tricky. So when you're looking at tricky time signatures, before we look at those, let me give you a crash course on time signatures. Okay? When you have 4, 4, that means that you've got 4 quarter notes. Okay? When in the measure. When you have 3, 4, you've got 3 quarter notes in the measure. When you've got 5, 4, you've got 5 quarter notes in the measure. When you've got 6, 8, that means you've got 6 8 notes in the measure. 3, 8 is 3 8 notes in the measure. 12, 8, 12, 8. Okay, 2, 2, you've got 2 half notes in the measure. 3, 2 is 3 half notes in the measure. 4, 2, 4 half. Do you guys see the pattern there? Okay. There's a lot more, there's a little bit more to time signatures than that, but if you're coming into this just really not sure of time signatures, that's just a really easy way to jump into this next discussion. The saving grace about tricky time signatures is that once you get into the music, you find that that tricky, weird time signature actually makes perfect sense and follows a natural cadence and a natural pattern and a rhythm, even though on the page it might look like crushed hopes and dreams or something like that. Like when I look at 7, 8, sometimes, you know, a 7 does not feel natural to me in any cadence, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. I will lose myself every time in that measure if I'm counting 7. So what you want to do is you look at the music, and if there was a good engraver for the music, they have beamed how they want you to interpret it. So in the first example, you've got beams of 2, 2, and 3. So it's 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Don't mistake the 3 beamed together as a triplet. Here's what it would sound like if it were a triplet. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Do you see the difference?
Yes.
So the eighth note is the same. So it's easier when you're accompanying and there's lyrics, because usually there's a weird time signature to accommodate a lyric. So think of it as apple, apple, pineapple, apple, apple, pineapple, and then all of a sudden the 7, 8 makes sense and it's not scary anymore, right? Okay, so then 10-8, the next one is the same thing. Oh, by the way, you can mix these in any order. Maybe the music has pineapple, apple, apple, or apple, pineapple, apple. So it's still 7, but it makes sense just however you kind of think of them as groupings. With the 10-8, it's the same thing. We've got 3 plus 3 plus 2 plus 2, pineapple, pineapple, apple, apple, pineapple, pineapple, apple, apple. Everybody got that? Okay? Okay, so the next one, you will see this sometimes. 3 plus 3 plus 2 over 8. And it's like, what in the world? But actually, that's them being courteous to us because they're doing what we just did, but they're showing you what it looks like when it's not so obvious. Like this one is not as obvious as the ones we just looked at, right? 8 time signature, that's just really weird. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. Everybody following along with that?
Yeah.
Okay, anybody confused? I know I'm going kind of fast to make up for lost time here. Okay, so now let's look at a real life example. If you will go to the Song Cruise, on the song twos here, the tricky parts of this are the fact that we've got a meter change in almost every measure. Say Christian curse words. When I handed this out to the orchestra, of course they didn't have the lyrics in front of them, and I'm like, I am so sorry. Whatever your Christian curse word is, feel free or not, whatever your Christian liberty allows there. But anyways, not only does it have a different meter with almost every measure, but you're getting into some weird ones, especially on the second page, you're in 5/8 a lot. So, what I would like us to do is I want you guys to tap the 8th note, and I'm going to play it so you can see how everything fits together. When you're tapping along, I want you to accent the beginning of every grouping, even if I don't have an accent on the page. So for example, measure 2 does not have an accent in that measure, but there are 2 groupings, so I still want you to accent so you can find that. In measure 8, the second staff system, last measure, there's only 1 accent, but there's 3 groupings. Do you see that? Okay, so you're going to add the accent. So here is what, let's see here, what's our rhythm, tempo. This is slow, but this is what we're going to do. So this is your 8 note beat, so everybody's going to tap or clap right now. Join me. Got it? Okay, 2, 3, 10. tackle tricky time signatures? We're good with moving on? Okay. Next up, we've got playing tricky rhythms. And this is the point where I feel like many church pianists struggle, especially if you grew up like I did, where you've got a solid classical training and background, and you grew up in a really traditional church setting, and so nowhere in your life did you ever experience syncopation. And I kind of grew up under a rock, and we weren't even allowed to listen to syncopation. And so here I had a piano degree. You know, I felt like I was pretty solid on piano, and all of a sudden my church transitioned to modern music. I was like, how do I not know how to read this rhythm? What in the world? Because I was never used to internally feeling the offbeat of anything, and it messed with me for a while. But you can learn. You can learn later on in life, I promise you. So, the examples that I included are very easy, but I wanted to show you the easy version so we could drop that formula into anything tricky that you might run across, and it will work beautifully that way. Okay, so the good thing about tricky rhythms is that it's just math, you know? And it's not even hard math. I'm really bad at numbers, y'all, but even I can do this math. It's okay. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to find the halfway point in the measure. And not every time signature that works well with, but 4/4 it works great, 6/8 it works great, 12/8 it works great. It does not work well on 3/4, 5/4, that kind of a thing. But if you can find the halfway point in the measure that gives you an anchor, and of course in this music it's super easy, right? But again, I'm giving you the formula to drop anywhere. Then you want to find the and, or you want to find each beat. So you've got the 1, 2, 3, 4, not difficult, but I will tell you, when I was in high school and college, when I got into really advanced rhythms, I would take my pencil and I would have to draw, okay, here's where beat 2 starts, and I would draw it all the way down to where the bass clef was, so I could see the division, because your hands aren't always playing together at beat 2, and you might have all of these intricate little sub-beats that are going really fast here, and it's just off with your right hand, and you have to know exactly where beat 2 falls in the midst of all the chaos. So I did that with each beat, and I would label it above. Here's beat 1, with a line going down, beat 2, where I could just see the slice, that was beat 2, beat 3, beat 4. And then I went and I added in the ands of the beats, exactly where those landed, and then if there were any sub-beats after that, 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and. So find the halfway point, find each beat, find the and of the beat. We've already labeled those. And then here's where it gets really good, is when you practice it, you have to count it out loud, and not just the 1, 2, 3, 4. Every note that is on the page, you have to out loud say the syllable for. And it sounds elementary. When I was in 5th grade, I lived in Brainerd, Minnesota. Do you know where Brainerd is?
Yeah,
Okay.
very close.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I didn't remember. It was so long
It's
ago.
like an hour.
Okay.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of my growing up in Duluth, so I was pretty young when I was in Brainerd. So I didn't know all of the little surrounding cities, but I was, this little town in Brainerd, Minnesota, had maybe 11,000 people that lived in it. And actually, I lived in Baxter. Baxter is like teeny tiny, that's like part of Brainerd. And there was a waiting list in town for a piano teacher. I mean, there were lots of piano teachers in town, but there was a waiting list for this one piano teacher because she was so good. She was ancient, and she had her heat in her house set to like 82 every lesson. But she was cranky, but I loved her because I loved her so much. But she was so good. She was so good that there were waiting lists. And she made you, I mean, you had to be up to snuff if she was going to keep you. You had to practice an hour a day, whether you were in 1st grade or whether you were in 12th grade. You had to practice an hour a day, and you had to count out loud in your at-home rehearsal every note on the page. And then when you came back the next week, when you played your piece for her, if you didn't start counting every note out loud, she would say, no, stop, go back, count out loud. She transformed my playing in about 3 months. So, you know, people would come to my mom and say, you know, a couple months ago, Heather was 10 or 11, and, you know, she was a cute little piano player, but she's an advanced pianist now. What happened in like 3 months? And my mom said, we changed piano teachers. And the piano teacher had 3 rules. You had to practice painfully slow. We talked about that. You had to count out loud every single note in the measure, and you had to have strong fingers. She made you not play weak, timid fingers. She made you have strong fingers. So those 3 things, and every single person that went through her studio ended up being a good piano player. Whether they were gifted or not, that was the formula for success. So it was slow practice, painfully slow practice, counting every note out loud every day in rehearsal, and then playing with strong fingers. You have to build the strength in your fingers. So anyways, if you will take that little list of 4 or 5 things right there and drop them into any tricky rhythm, you will have figured out mathematically how to play it. And if you slow it down enough, 1 E and a, 2 E and a, 3 E and a, 4 E and a, 1 E and like some of those rhythms you see in the music that we're playing in some of our choir anthems, if you're in modern worship songs, and you're like, I have no idea how to play that rhythm. That's not natural. But if you will go and you'll mark it 1 E and a, 2 E and a, and count it out loud while you're playing very slowly, then you can mathematically lock it in. You can start gradually speeding it up, and then eventually you're going to start to feel the pulse of that rhythm, and then you turn on your metronome, and you put it with a consistent tempo, find out where the weaknesses are, where your fingers are not strong enough, where it's going to fall apart, all these things that we already talked about, okay? Okay, let's see here. Playing tricky leaps and quick movements. Another weakness. I feel like there's a couple of weaknesses in pianists. One is the tricky rhythms, that we're not always solid on rhythms. The other one is that we're not great at quick movement around the piano. We get comfortable playing here, and then we can move up here, and then we play here, up here, up here, up here for a while, and then we can move down here and play here, 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 here for a while. But to go from here to there, we're not as good as we should be on that. So what I would do in that instance is your block chords that we talked about. That helps you. You're gradually moving and you're getting faster and faster. After you have kind of conquered that, then you can do. It doesn't have to be those exact inversions that I'm playing, but you're getting your hands used to jumping all over, and then you can pick up speed a little bit as you're doing that. And then change inversions and do it until you get it right, and you can do it fast enough, and then change inversions again. Do it in a different chord, do it in different keys. Get your hands used to moving around the keyboard quickly. For fast arpeggios, if you will go to Rejoice the Lord is King, example 1. So the little formula on this is that we want to recognize the chord, not just each note, because sometimes I've had pianists open up a book or a song that is just all black notes all over the page, and they're like, oh, you can just see their little balloon deflating. Oh, how do I have to learn every one of these notes. Yes, but no. There's some ways that we can make it easier. So you're going to identify the chord. So in the first beat, you've got a C, B, C, G, so that is C major, yep. The next beat is G, C, G, E, so that's a C major, yeah, the next one is E, C, the next one is C. Yeah, see how easy piano playing is? It's so easy. Okay, so then the next one, we won't put that slow. Your first beat is G, second one is G, second one, third, G, yeah. And then the next measure, C minor, C minor, C minor, C minor, and then G, G, G. Okay, so we've identified the chords. Now, so when these things come up, we don't have to necessarily think of every single note. We already know the triad notes, right? Okay, so then we identify the pattern, and this is where it's going to help you the most. This is all a pattern. We look at the very first one, the very first rhythmic grouping in measure 27, and we start on a note, then we go up, down, down, right? Next one is same, up, down, down. See, we've got the same, up, down, down, same, up, down, down. That's our pattern. So if you look at the next measure, we go to a different note, but we start, then we go up, down, down, same, up, down, down, same, up, down, down, same, up, down, down, right? And the next measure is the same thing. Up, down, down, same, up, down, down, same, up, down, down, same. Okay, so now we've identified the chords, we've identified the pattern, chords. And I do this when I want to pick up speed sometimes. So my first one, I just played as a block chord. Here's it broken apart. So when you play as a block, there's a block. So that's the first measure if it's a block, right? So make sure that I can do that fairly fast without making mistakes. Slow it down if you find that you're hitting the wrong notes. Then I go to the next measure. Okay, what are these in block chords? Okay. And when you're playing these in block chords, you're automatically using the right finger, y'all. Which is another reason why we're doing this, because you're already locking in the correct fingering. Okay, so now I'm going to put it back together. So you practice that as slowly as you need to, till you get it right. And then remember, we loop it like a tick-tock loop. We go back and faster until we can't get that wrong. Then we break it apart. Okay, both hands together here. Okay, so when you do the block chords, that actually helps you. You can do it in that tempo. Because I'm getting you used to moving your hands quickly down the keyboard in exactly the speed and motion that you'll be using when you break it apart. Does that make sense? Why I had you do that before, the block chords? Okay, so you're like, okay, that sounds really good in theory. I can kind of do that. Now help me polish it off so it has that, you know how sometimes it gets all herky-jerky sounding? So that happens when your fingers are too weak. When your fingers are too weak, that means that you're not going to have this thing. So practice staccato. So your shoulder has to stay down. Your arm, the whole forearm has to be so relaxed, y'all. The key to speed is relaxed and strong. If you tense up at all, you have to stop. Because you're building a muscle memory of tenseness, and I promise you, if you practice it tense a couple times in a row, it's going to take a whole lot of undoing to unlearn that, and it's just, you do not want that to happen. It will take too long to unlearn that. Your muscle memory, you're going to fight that. So as soon as you feel tension, you stop. You relax it, you move to another passage if you need to, and come back and keep it very relaxed, but you're going to practice staccato. Shoulders down. All the way through, very strong, very even. My fingers are coming up. These are the strong fingers. Mrs. Henneman always used to yell at me. Strong fingers, pick your fingers up. So that's what she meant when she wanted strong fingers. So, and you will find that you hit some wrong notes because that's not really the motion that we do when we're playing. It's a little bit unnatural. I'm handicapping myself on purpose when I'm doing this. So when you find that your fingers are hitting weird notes that you don't normally miss, then you slow it down until you can get it fast and accurate like that. And then after you've done that a number of times, and you go back and it just goes. So I had a great high school piano teacher, and I was working on Franz Liszt in Suspiria. And I loved it. I loved it. It was so melancholy, and I was so melancholy. It was a wonderful fit. But I came back after the first week of the assignment, and he said, "So how did it go?" I said, "Oh, I love it, but I don't like how I play that theme that goes all the way through because I feel like I can't get it smooth, where it's just this river that's flowing. I feel like it's got all these little jerks in it." And he said, "Oh, well, you need to practice it staccato, and that will take care of that." So I went and I practiced it staccato, and I came back the next week and he said, "How did it go?" I said, "Oh, it didn't work." And he said, "Oh, it should work." I said, "But it didn't work." He's like, "It should work." He said, "Show me." And we went back and forth on that a little bit. He said, "Show me how you practice." So, you know, shoulders down. And I played. He said, "That's what you did." He said, "You only practiced it staccato one time, and then you put it together." He said, "You have to do a ratio of 6 or 7 times staccato, and then you go back and play it. And the next day, you do it 6 or 7 times staccato, and then you play it. And after a while, you have built up so much strength in your fingers that you don't have to do that 6 or 7 times every day. And the reason why that exercise strengthens your fingers, because the way God made our fingers, they're connected, right? You move your middle finger and a whole bunch of other fingers move at the same time. So when you're doing staccato, you're making them operate a little bit more independently than they normally do. So they're working harder. It's like they're doing muscle curls, kind of. If you, I don't know, that's a really weird example, but it has kind of that same effect. You're handicapping them a little bit. You're making them work harder, and you're building strength. And remember, our formula for speed is strength and relaxing, no tension. Okay? But slow practice is very good. You should have that too. Okay, so another little trick for that I wrote down. Sometimes you need to eyeball marker notes or important notes. My high school teacher said, you will rarely miss a note if you're looking at it. Because I had a piece that I was practicing, and I practiced it and practiced it and practiced it, and I said, I've practiced this so many times, and I know I'm supposed to play A natural there, and I always miss it. I always miss it. Why do I always miss it? And he said, well, are you looking at it? I said, no. He said, look at it. Look at it. If you have a note that you consistently miss, look at it, because our eyes guide our fingers. And he was so right, and I have held on to that little tip my whole career. And so at the very beginning of my career, I was at an event similar to this, but it was in a different part of the country. And they had an opening concert, worship concert, the first night of the conference. And they asked me if I would do the whole concert. So here I am, just new in my career. I'm at this conference, and I'm doing the opening concert. And my first piece of music was Rejoice the Lord is King, that I had never played ever before. I mean, outside of home, but this was my first performance at the opening night, the opening concert, the beginning of my career, which is kind of just a disaster. You know, that is not the formula for success right there. Because you never know where something's going to fall apart, really, until you put it in a performance the first time, and then you realize, oh, okay, now I know where this lives and where this dies in real life. Okay, so I get to, you see the back page, I get to the thing at the end, and I did that. And I had to make this split-second decision. Do I pretend that none of us in the room heard that? Knowing that we all heard that? Or do I acknowledge it? And so I made a split-second decision that was so risky, you all. I said, okay, that is not how I practiced that. This was my opening song on the opening night, the beginning of my career. That is not how I practiced that. Can I go back and play that last part again, how I practiced it? And of course, I kind of cleared the air a little bit that I acknowledged the elephant in the room. But it was awful, because what if I don't land it the next time? Then I've destroyed my credibility for the rest of the week, right? I'm a piano clinician for this whole event. And so I was like, dear Lord, help me, help me, help me. So you cannot pray while you're performing. But I had like a 20-second, dear Lord, help me. And God was good, and I landed it because the whole time I was doing this. The second time I'm like, look at your finger, look at your finger, look at your finger, look at your finger. And I came through and landed it. And then I went back down and did it. The reason why I missed it the first time was because there is a choreography between your eyes and your hands that has to happen when you're playing. So I was doing all of this stuff up here, knowing that I had to land this note with my left hand while coming down here to play this final C a split second later. So I've already got the motion going for this one, and I'm like, okay, my left hand's just going to take over, and I'm going to eyeball this fast movement down here. And so that's where my eyes were, but my left hand couldn't follow that far away from my body, because the farther away you are from your body, the more prone you are to make mistakes. Well, I was doing this, and it had to be just the way the pattern was going. It had to be a this with a this motion. And so I chose to look here rather than here, and I learned real quick that on this piece, my eyes always have to stay on that C until I finish playing it And then I let my eyes look here, and I follow through, even if it means it takes me a split second extra to get down there. So there's a choreography involved between eyes and hands. It's going to be different for every song, and it's probably going to be different for every player because our hands are all different, our arm lengths are all different. So understand that if you're missing something repeatedly, know that your eyes guide your fingers, and maybe that choreography is not quite aligned like it should be. Okay, we're down to just the last few things here. Tips for sight reading. How many of you like sight reading? Oh, good. Most of us like sight reading. How many of you hate sight reading? Or are you just like, I'm not that fond of it? Okay, so here are some tips. It has been said, sight reading isn't about playing all the notes. It's about knowing which ones to sacrifice with dignity. I kind of agree with that. It's really nice when we can actually sight read every note, but that's not always the case. And sometimes it has nothing to do with how fantastic of a player you are or you aren't. There are some pieces that are just not sight readable as written, and that's okay. So just release yourself from that expectation. So when you get into those situations, prioritize the bass note and the chords over individual notes, especially if you're in an accompaniment situation. The bass note and the chords are the things that are most important that you have to get. You also don't have to read every note if there's 1,000 notes in the measure, but read the pattern. Remember how we had that? Hopefully you don't have to sight read something like that. If there are easier, more manageable patterns that are in the music, if you can just lock into a pattern, that will help you. If it feels like a scale and it walks like a scale, it's probably a scale. Sometimes we just have to kind of fake it. But you want to keep the pulse and the tempo moving. Don't go back and fix it if you're accompanying. Don't stop to cry. Don't stop to pray. You just keep going. And if you stay in rhythm with the basses, the bass notes, and the right chords, if you stay in rhythm, you can usually jump back in when the page stops being so rude to you, But that is so rude. Why would they do that? But if you just keep that tempo moving, you can usually jump back in. If you have just a few moments to practice, maybe you have, I still count, someone hands you the music 5 minutes before you go on, I count that sight reading. Okay, I'm going to count that one as, yep, I sight read that. If you have those 5 minutes, the things that you should focus on, especially if it's like a choir anthem or if you're accompanying someone, introductions, interludes, and modulations, because that's where you need to be the most solid. That's where you're most exposed. If you completely blow the introduction, the choir can't come in, or your soloist can't come in. They can keep singing if you're hitting wrong notes a little bit underneath while they're playing every now and then, but if you blow the introduction, they're not going to be able to come in. If you blow the interlude, it all falls apart for their next entrance. If you blow the modulation, even your best singers are going to have a hard time coming in. So if you've got 3 to 5 minutes, those are the things you need to look over. You can also practice sight reading, like 3 to 5 minutes a day. It doesn't have to be big. You can pull out an old hymnal, pull out an ancient Christmas cantata that you don't remember playing, from 2002 or something like that. The goal is kind of low stakes, where you build up your confidence, so that way when you get in a real life situation, you have already grown that muscle, but more importantly, you've grown your confidence. You've learned how to do the pattern in that. Yes?
I was just going to add that it's, I believe very strongly that it's a different skill set.
It is.
And sometimes we get so I'm a tuba player, we get so into working on what we're working on that I know this really well because I've done it multiple times.
Right.
But then I sit down and sight read something and I haven't
You haven't had sight read in a long time.
Right.
Absolutely. And I am in the same boat. I love sight reading. And sight reading was one of my big skills at the beginning of my career. I don't sight read a lot anymore because I only ever do my music.
Right.
When I go somewhere, They don't want me to play Joe's music. You know, they want a concert of Heather Sorenson music, and so I only do my music. And so when I get into those situations, I'm like, I haven't sight read forever. But for those of you who it might not be a natural thing, it is a skill that you can beef up, even if it's not a natural skill set for you. It's something you can grow. My 5th grade piano teacher, that was, you know, everybody had a waiting list on. She would, the last 3 minutes of every lesson, she pulled out this little cupcake liner for her students. And every measure that you played correctly in sight reading, she threw a piece of candy in.
Oh.
And, you know, so it was usually easier music. If this is something you struggle with, make it a little bit easier than what you can do in a performance level and practice sight reading that. And if you want to throw, you know, candy in a tin, you can do that. Now, her candy was like 2 decades old, so you get there, broken tooth, you know, and just throw it out. But this is something that you can become better at, even if it is not a natural skill set that you have. That was a really good point. So I know it's time. I've got like 2 minutes of encouragement. Can I give you encouragement?
Of course.
Okay. I'm big on letting people out on time, but I know that it's a little loosey-goosey right now. This is a made-up number, by the way. 85% or more of your congregation thinks you're a wizard for even showing up and playing. I would say it's probably closer to 95, and the other 5% are just grumpy people. Right? If you mess up, remember that God's math is different. Broken things still carry beauty. Isn't that the most beautiful truth? God wants what we have, and He wants our heart to be right. There's a passage in the New Testament that says that God asks for what we have. He doesn't ask for what we don't have. Success with God is offering what you have with a pure heart. Nothing else He requires of us in our gifts. And if you play the wrong note, this is point 3, with enough heart and feeling, you can just call it an exclusive, and it's available only at this service.
Or call it jazz.
Call it jazz. Call it jazz. We did a little bit of jazz in the reading session over there in one of my pieces. Not really. I mean, we started together, we ended together. It's like, well, everything else in the middle just kind of fell apart. We're just going to call that jazz. Okay, 2 more points. We don't just accompany music. We accompany moments, holy moments. We accompany weddings, funerals, baptisms, communion. For those of us who are here in Texas, we accompany the Sunday after the flood services. We have underscored the holy. We don't just go and play a piece of music. It goes so much deeper than that. And when you stop and think about the things that we accompany and underscore, people's sacred vows, a whole life captured in one service as it's being ushered into heaven. I mean, these are heavy, heavy things, and we're the soundtrack to that. And then finally, God uses tired hands, tired bodies, cluttered minds, and sometimes even unwashed hair on Sunday to bring peace and comfort and hope to His people. So, if you don't get the sight reading right, if you can't pull off that arpeggio with strong fingers, if that tricky key signature or time signature just defeats you, remember those things, but now you also have some tools to apply, right? Okay, any questions? Okay, have a fabulous rest of your evening, and you guys are dismissed.